Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Dr. Sherif Amir, the geopolitical affairs expert and political analyst. Dr. Amir, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Dr. Amir, first of all, we're talking about the visit of the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, here to Egypt. It's a 3-day visit. They spoke, she spoke with President Sisi on a number of files, but this visit coincides with the 65th anniversary of establishing diplomatic ties between Egypt and Denmark. So before we start talking about the details of the issues being discussed, how would you describe the history of the relations between Egypt and Denmark?
Well, we all know that our relations with the whole Scandinavian part is very positive because there is so much differences between Scandinavia and the Middle East. So we had many things to exchange, many things to discover. Of course, we all know that the Egyptian civilization was always something very attracting for the whole European hemisphere. Then, when Denmark became member of the EU, of course, we had to have good relations with everyone, especially these countries who are rich countries, and they have a say in everything. And then we had to work in the atmosphere of exportation and commerce. I think that Egypt at that time was very keen to create this this kind of ties with all the Western Bloc at that time. It's not something new that when as you see, the world is very volatile now, that when Denmark wants to discover new opportunities outside of Europe, which is experiencing heavy economic problems, they come to the Middle East, they come to the Gulf, and they come to Egypt, which is a solid rock of security, and they trust our leadership.
Yes. Well, Dr. Amir, it seems that one of the issues that the President always discusses with other foreign leaders coming to visit Egypt, especially European leaders, they always talk about illegal migration and human trafficking, and President Sisi spoke about it in his joint press conference with the Danish Prime Minister, and she also mentioned it a lot. Now, since 2016, no boats have crossed the borders from Egypt into any European country. So why is it so complicated for other countries to really control the illegal migration taking place through the Mediterranean Sea? How come, or how can Egypt really lend its know-how or expertise of actually eliminating any illegal migration from its borders to the European continent?
Well, in this specific issue, there are 3 main elements. The first one is the political will. If the country is willing to fight this organized crime, I think that Egypt was the only one in the Mediterranean, southern Mediterranean, and I'm not in the northern Mediterranean as Turkey. We have seen the blackmail. We were the only one showing this willingness to prevent what's going on through Libya, through Syria, and we can do it. And we wanted to gain the trust of the Western Bloc. It was at the same time when Egypt started its new phase of democracy in 2013, and everyone was skeptic about Egypt. So it was a goodwill gesture. We're showing everyone that we have the willingness. The second point is the logistic capability. If you have an excellent navy like Egypt, you could do it, because we all know that these are organized crimes. They have weapons, they have countries helping them, also financing them. So if you don't have strong navy patrolling the maritime zones, the international zone and your own maritime territory, you won't be able to do it. And in the southern Mediterranean, Egypt is #1 in this aspect. The third element is the intelligence. You have to have connections everywhere. You have to have eyes everywhere, ears everywhere. Not like the James Bond as we see it, but as something very has a structure everywhere. You have to have your people in Turkey, people in Syria, in Libya. We were in Libya and we knew what was going on. That's why President Sisi used to say, be aware, if we would not sustain the security there, if we would not support Marshal Khalifa Haftar, if there will not be there will be failed state, it will be disastrous for all of us. So these three elements, which is the political willingness and the Navy and also the intelligence apparatus or the intelligence services, these are the elements that show to any Western partner that you're a strong partner. Look, for example, one of the things that gives another leader trust with his counterpart is when he gives him info which is crucial to the security of his own country. By the way, we did the same thing with Qais bin Said in Tunisia. When he came to power, he was hostile to Egypt. But we showed him that we have the info and what was going on, the conspiracy inside Tunisia to ruin the country. And he became very grateful to Egypt and to President Sisi. So when you have these structures, you show that you're an honest country, you want your own interest to protect it, your sovereignty, and also you can be helpful. A helpful friend is very important in these situations.
Yes. So this is how Egypt proves to other countries, mainly the European countries, that it is serious about combating illegal migration, and it's because of those three reasons you've mentioned. Now we save a lot of headache for these European countries. Now, what sort of respect and benefits can we then get from those European countries? Is it mainly intelligence cooperation between Egypt and those European countries, or how is it translated now, this mutual respect between both countries as a result of Egypt pioneering in combating illegal migration?
Well, especially with Denmark. We all remember that in early 2000 there was the Danish cartoons, and it ruined the relationship between Egypt and the Arab and the Muslim world with Denmark. And as you said, there was this lack of mutual respect. And then we had the same issue with France, and President Sisi, when he went to France and he explained to the French that there is freedom of speech, but you have to respect the other nations. So at that time, the Danish people or the Danish state did not really understand what was about the Middle East. Why this anger? This is a kind of expression of freedom of speech. We had harsh time at that time, and we explained our point of view. And then they accepted to have refugees, and it turned out that Daesh is infiltrating them. So they were puzzled, and we had to explain again that goodwill and charity is something, but you have to be very aware that people take advantage of the misery of others and infiltrate. And create problems. And then when there is terrorism, it's always about religion and culture. There is no one distincts between this or that. So I think that diplomacy, this is another aspect, had a huge task to explain the complexity of the Middle East. The Middle East is not easy at all. It's full of problems, although, let me say, it was caused mainly by the colonization at a certain time, the French and the British. As we see in Lebanon, for example, the sectarian, how they managed to have 18 sects inside this tiny country, and they're all fighting each other. And in Iraq, and the same thing. So it was made in Western world, but maybe the Scandinavian world was not really implicated in all that. So I think diplomacy played a huge role to tell them that we could help you in fighting terrorism. We could help you in fighting organized crime, because we are all in the same circle. It could seem geographically that it's the high north, I mean the Scandinavian, and the Middle East is in the southern part of the Mediterranean, but now we're living in a world where someone sneezes, everyone is contaminated.
Yes. Well, sir, I mean, you've mentioned the whole issue that is taking place within the European continent, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, and it really affects the European continent and the whole globe. Now, President Sisi has mentioned repeatedly the Egyptian stance regarding this, which is looking for a diplomatic and peaceful solution, ending the violence, not really taking harsh or extreme sides in this conflict. What about Denmark? Where does it stand from the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, and how can they be of, I mean, how can they deal with the repercussions of this conflict in terms of their cooperation with Egypt, be it politically or economically?
I think that the Danish they listened today to President Sisi, and I think they will have to readjust their policy towards this conflict. Denmark, unfortunately, in the past week, gave all its Leopards tanks in their arsenal, the total number of all of them, to Ukraine. They gave the artillery now to Ukraine. Their camps are almost empty now. And I think that this is a huge problem now for many countries like Germany and Denmark, who gave artillery from their own stocks, and now the conflict didn't end. It's getting worse. I think that they should listen now to President Sisi when he said, look, you have to find a diplomatic way to solve that, because arming the regime of Kiev is fueling again and again the conflict. We are talking with our friends in Russia. We have seen that President Sisi spoke with President Vladimir Putin recently. The Chinese are trying to find a solution. Jinping, the Chinese president, will go to Moscow, and then he will talk to Zelensky of Ukraine and through the internet to find a deal. So I think that Europe needs to hear another voice rather than Washington. Even the Polish, who are very, very, they have this aggressive language towards Russia. So I think that now that the Danish government or the Danish defense institution gave all its weapons and the Leopard tanks to Kiev, I think that things now are very, very crucial. They have to listen to countries like Egypt, that this policy won't end the violence. It won't help to find a solution in Kiev, in Ukraine. I think that President Sisi is presenting also the opinion of the Arab world. Why we didn't join the Western world in the sanctions, although the Middle East 99% is pro-American through the last decade, became pro-American. Why we didn't follow these directives, if we can call it like that? I think that they want to hear our opinion. They want to listen if there is another way than taking sides, whether Washington or Moscow. So we're showing them that maybe you could have this voice of them talking to the Russians, and in the same time not giving all the weapons and the artillery to the regime of Kiev, who's losing on the ground. It's useless. The Russians are winning. So I think that something has to be done to stop the spiral of violence.
Well, Denmark has its own candidature to the UN Security Council membership. Now, how influential can Denmark be with a membership within the UN Security Council? And as you've mentioned, I mean, not just Denmark, but as you've mentioned, Germany, a heavyweight in the European continent, is really taking a strong side for Ukraine. I mean, can they really stand up against a Washington stance in terms of supporting Ukraine and prolonging really this Russian-Ukrainian conflict? And where does Egypt, how can Egypt be helpful in the candidacy of Denmark being in the UN Security Council?
Of course, we all know that Denmark is the EU also. It's the whole body of the EU. So it's wise from the Danish part to contact the other parts of the world. If they will have this place, they have to listen to Egypt, they have to listen to Turkey, they have to listen to the Gulf states, to Israel, to Iran. You have to listen to everyone, because once you have a place, a chair in the UN, you have the responsibility of being wise. You don't take sides, and you have to be very clear about your stance. So the first thing, that the Danish will have the EU policy, whether they like it or not, like they were. I believe, for example, they got the orders to give the Leopard tanks. So there is this lack of, I don't want to call it lack of sovereignty, but they're under the control of the EU. So the EU gives the foreign policy, gives the instructions. This is the first thing. The second thing, of course, is that they should listen to the leaders in the Middle East, leaders like President Sisi. They had many wrong ideas about Egypt's new era after the 2013 revolution, the 30th of June. And they got this idea of a coup and all that. But after that, they discovered, no, it was the choice of the people. And the infrastructure in Egypt improved. They have also this question about why there is economic problems, and we are explaining to them that we are living in the same world as you. You have having the same problems in the Scandinavian countries now. Of course, it's not like us, but still, we are all now condemned to pay a price for the ongoing economic slaughter. We've just seen in the United States today, 3 banks are in bankruptcy. So things are crumbling. So I think that we are now telling the Danish part that you can count on us, a country like Egypt, on many opinions. When, for example, there will be a problem in Africa and they have to say something about it, they have to have friends in Africa to give advice about it.
They also talked about the human rights file, and both countries, Egypt and Denmark, they shared and agreed upon Egypt's vision regarding this file.
We all know that the European countries, especially the Scandinavian countries, received many figures, let's say some political figures from the Middle East, and they saw that they were nice, oppressed people, and they discovered after that they were gangsters, followers of some extremist groups, and they harmed the society who just offered them the protection. I think they learned the lesson. They learned that they were playing with fire with these people. They got the funding, they got all the opportunities to voice their opposition, and after that they were violent people. So I think that they know now that they shouldn't trust anyone who comes and say, I'm oppressed in Egypt, I'm oppressed in Syria, I'm oppressed elsewhere, and they have to ask, what did these people do? And they will find their violent past. They will find that these people were traitors to their countries. So I think that they exchange about these topics in Egypt. Of course, there is also this definition of human rights between the East and the West. But when let's see, when we had this fight against terrorism, I was in France and I saw how the French, suddenly when they were hurt by terrorism, they became like every country in the Middle East, with martial law, was banning any gatherings, and no one said it's against the human rights or freedom of speech, because it was the security. So I think that the Western world now understands more what's the definition of human rights.
Yes. Well, another topic that has been discussed between President Sisi and Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen was the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And it seems that in any meeting, in any gathering between President Sisi with any foreign leader or Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri meeting any of his counterparts in any gathering or any country, the issue of the Renaissance Dam and finding a legal and binding agreement regarding the filling and operation of the dam, this topic has always been discussed, and it's a topic that has been on the agenda, on the Egyptian agenda since 2011. So what is what's the end, or what are the results that Egypt want to achieve? Do we want a unanimous sort of vision or a declaration by the UN in terms of a binding resolution by the UN for the filling and operation of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam? I mean, and all the countries, all the leaders agree on the necessity of having this binding agreement.
We all know that the Renaissance Dam is an international corporation. There is investment of numerous countries. And the IMF also is implicated in that. Gulf states are investing in it. Some of our dear friends are investing in the Renaissance Dam. We in Egypt, at a certain time, we thought it was we were contributing that in the developing of the economy of our brothers in Ethiopia. But unfortunately, we have seen that things turned into the wrong way. By the way, never Egypt objected the construction of this dam. We were the first encouraging our brothers there, and as President Sisi called them our brothers in Ethiopia, to go on to build their economy. But we thought that they will respect, and I don't mean by that the Ethiopians, I mean the regime.
Yes.
We thought they will respect the international accords, the regional accords, the African Union decisions, and unfortunately it was not the case. Things should, at that time, changed, literally changed. They hide, for example, the secret of the constructions, the filling. We discovered there will be this filling. We were contributing in their prosperity, and they were hiding another plans. Let's say if we have the goodwill that they were manipulated by some of our outside enemies, but nevertheless, they have to be frank with us. They should abide to these accords. So I think that, as we said it before in Egypt, the Horn of Africa would pay very, very heavy price if Egypt's water resources would be harmed. And of course, for Europe, they don't need a new conflict anywhere else. So I think that we have to have the backing of these countries whenever the file will be open again in the UN. There is another point, if you permit, we speak about the economic part.
Yes.
The Europeans are aware now that the eastern part of the world are getting rid of the dollar as a currency. And they're worried about their currency. Denmark is like Sweden, and they're in the euro. Norway said no. Norway is not part of the euro zone because they're very rich, and they knew that it won't be in their interest to be in the eurozone. So I think that the Danish are worried also. Well, if you're going to get rid of the currency, the main currency of the dollar, and then you join the BRICS, for example, you join Shanghai conference, for example, any regional, what the eurozone would be. Can we trade with the Are you going to change your economic policy to trade with your own money? I think they were a bit worried about our future economic plans.
Yes. Well, is this why the President also spoke with the Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen regarding the Suez Canal economic zone and the prospects of having industrial zones, opportunities? And it's something that the President did with the Danish Prime Minister, with the United Arab Emirates high-level businessman delegation, also with Uzbekistan, also with the Qatari businessmen, also with Croatia. So is the Suez Canal industrial zones, does it show a way out for the European countries and even Middle Eastern countries, a place, a fertile soil for investments and markets?
Well, let's say also about the Western Bloc, they are worried that the sector of the Suez Canal is under the Chinese microscope. The Russians were interested about it at a certain time, but now the Russians are focused on the nuclear reactor in Davao. And this is, well, this is a huge plan. So it will change all the dynamics in the Middle East, especially that there will be Russian experts also present. So the other piece of the cake, as we can say it, for the investment is the Suez Canal. And I think the Chinese are willing to build factories there. So this would be a huge blow up for the western part. We're not taking sides against anyone. But as President Sisi said it numerous times, we have our interests first, our sovereignty should be respected, and we are friendly with everyone. If the Chinese will offer a quick, rich plan, why not? If the Emiratis will do it, why not? This is the free economy. We are in a free economy world. Why wouldn't we enjoy that? Especially that we have a plan that this would be a very prosperous region. But let's not forget that also that it's very sensitive for Egypt, the Suez Canal, and the region surrounding it. It's high potential military and strategic point. We have all this coverage about the economy, but inside the roots, it's also strategic. So we're studying very well who have the plans and why. And I think we won't give a huge portion to one side. We will make the partition.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just about bolstering the Egyptian-Danish relations, but also the Iraqi-Egyptian relations. This was in light of the recent visit by the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia Sudani, his first official visit to Egypt as Prime Minister. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.